Is this also a strong connection for you with your country?
Absolutely.
Because you're able to give back now to this ecosystem.
Completely. And I feel like, look, I'm where I am because of what this country gave me.
Yes.
And certainly, right. And I've always, I've never left, really in any way, right. I mean, yes, I'm maybe physically there, but mentally my heart is here.
Thank you so much for doing this with us, Rajiv. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Likewise, I'm looking forward to it, Karishma. I've seen some of your other shows and it's just fascinating. So I'm so happy to be here.
Excited. And my first question is actually super interesting. We were doing a lot of research on you. And the term Cosmopolitan Silicon Valley CEO came up quite a few times. So that's exciting. But there's a journey to anything that leads to that kind of a title. So we want to backtrack and go to a 10-year-old Rajiv. What were your dreams? What were your goals? What did you want to do?
Yeah, when I was 10 years old, I didn't really have a lot of dreams or aspirations. I was a kid. I used to play on the street. And one of the things I remember back then, back then was, my parents were both working and they were in the railways. And so we moved around a lot. And I grew up playing on the street with mostly blue-collar kids, even though my parents were white-collar. On the streets, I used to play cricket like everybody else. We used to have long commutes to our school.
Right.
My sister and I, when I was 10, she was 5. And, I wasn't really thinking much about the world or the future or what it was going to look like. I was just thinking about having a good time and, making sure that I was studying and doing what I needed to do. My parents always valued academics and making sure we were focused on our education. But they were also pretty busy and they let us do our own thing.
Right.
So what I would say was even at that time, we were pretty independent.
Right, of course.
And doing our own thing. We would go to school in the morning, come back, and after that, come home, I would go play and be back. And my parents would probably come home by 8, 9.
So, wow. So how did you fill the time as a kid growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, there was a lot of interesting experiences. One thing, even as a kid, my parents would travel a lot. So, and they would take us along. So we traveled all over, and even when I talk about traveling all over, even like smaller cities, smaller municipalities, all over, wherever my parents were posted, they would go around. We traveled. So the travel bug was very much there, and it still, by the way, continues to be there with me after all these years. And except that it was all travel within India. It was all travel. It was a great experience because I got to know just foods from various regions, culture, temples, all of that. So I enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah. And what kind of a student were you? Were you very academically inclined? Were you a class topper? Were you just about like in the middle?
Yeah, I was always a good student. I was always towards the top of the class, academically. But I don't think I particularly worked hard or was nerdy. I did what I needed to do. So here's my philosophy there. I did what I needed to do and made sure I got good marks. But it wasn't necessarily the only thing I was focused on. Right? I had more fun playing and
outside the classroom.
And hanging out with friends back then.
And it's come up in our research that you mentioned this a couple of times, that you grew up in a home where your parents were equals and there were no predefined job roles as such. Can you talk us through a little bit of that, because that's so refreshing to hear, especially back in the time?
I tell you, I think that story goes back to my grandfather, my maternal grandfather. He was in a situation where his father died when he was very young, and he had a number of brothers and sisters to take care of. And one of the things he managed to do, and so it was on him, he was 15, 16 years old, and he had kids who were 3, 4 years old that he had to take care of. And one of the things I, absolutely give him kudos for back then, and this I'm talking about 30s and 40s. He made sure that at least the younger siblings who were women got educated.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, they were educated. In fact, my grand aunt, who's the only surviving member of the family, lives in Mumbai. She's almost 97 years old.
Wow.
And I got to see her a couple of days ago. And she was educated. She had a career. And that was back then. And then he made sure that his 2 daughters, my mother was one of them, got an education as well. And so from there on, my mom had an equal career with my father. They were peers pretty much all through. Sometimes we had a 2-body problem. She would have a job in one city and my father would have a job in another city.
Oh, wow.
And so they made it work. And so for me, that was a norm growing up because I saw this. I saw my mother. She had a job just like everybody else. And no, not like everybody else, I should say. Just like my father, I should say. But what I came to appreciate over time was that wasn't the case with all my other friends. Most of them had stay-at-home moms.
Correct.
And by the way, that's a very important thing. And in fact, I'll get back to that later, perhaps, because my wife is right now stay at home, even though she had a career at one point.
Yeah.
But it was different, right? It was different from the norm. But for me, that was the norm growing up. My mom was every bit as educated. In fact, one of the things that she keeps ruing to this day at times is that, she was on a path to get into the IAS.
Right.
And my father got into the railways.
Yeah.
And so she felt, that she had to get into the railways, or she felt pressure to get into the railways. And she says, well, if, it was a love marriage, by the way, for them.
Yeah.
And she says, if it were not for him, I would probably be an IAS. And she says that to this day. This was in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, so refreshing to hear.
Very different. And I have to applaud because, I think it takes a lot of courage and a lot of more, to actually stand up at that time. It wasn't as easy as it is now.
Of course.
By now. And it was by far. And, I've seen her, she's the only woman and surrounded by, hundreds of men. And she has to take a command and control role, right? In those kind of environments. And it's not easy.
It's not easy. Definitely. I can't imagine it would be easy. Yeah.
A lot of fortitude.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's what it was so interesting when it came up, just given the time, right?
Yes.
Like when it was happening.
Yeah, what's considered norm now is absolutely wasn't the norm back then.
Yeah.
So
it was just how life was.
It's just how life was.
Yeah.
And we didn't think twice about it. And we didn't think twice about the fact that we had to change schools every year or every other year.
Yeah.
As well.
Of course. Yeah, and just the fact that, it was different to come home to just you and your sibling.
Yes,
probably.
Exactly.
And after this, you went on to IIT Madras.
Yes.
How was that experience? Because IIT just has, it's its own bubble, it's its own world. So what was that like?
Yeah, and first of all, I was so lucky, because I don't know what I would have done if I had not gotten into an IIT. And,
was it your decision, or were you kind of nudged into it by your parents?
No, my parents had nothing to do with it.
Okay, it was your decision.
They left me they were so busy that they left me largely alone and my sister. As long as we got good grades, good marks, they didn't
really bother.
They didn't bother. They were fine. They thought we'd take care of ourselves, and we did to a large extent.
Yeah.
And so I heard about IIT, through the grapevine, and I ended up applying.
Yeah.
And I was studying in a CBSE school
Correct.
at the time, Central Board, and so I did not even bother applying to state engineering colleges. Okay, so if I had not gotten IIT, I don't think there was no other engineering college that I would have gotten into. And so I had applied for the Merchant Navy, and I got into the Merchant Navy.
Oh.
So God forbid, if I had not got into IIT, I probably would have been in the Merchant Navy by now. But anyway, I was so lucky to get in. And then to your point, once I got in, I was a bit intimidated, to tell you the truth, because, I went to central schools all through my career, but most of them were in what I would call blue-collar areas.
Yeah.
So, like I went to the last school where I did my 9th to 12th was Central School in Avadi. It was a heavy vehicles factory. They made tanks.
Oh, okay.
And so they made the only tanks actually that India had.
Yeah.
Before that, I was in studying in a KV that was associated with the gun factory in Trichy.
Right.
And most of my fellow students and friends were, their parents worked in the factory.
Right.
And so that was a group that I had worked with. Now, I come into IIT. Back then, it's, to your earlier word, cosmopolitan, right?
Yeah.
The kids who came to IIT were largely from cities. Yes, I lived in cities, but my association was with a different class of people.
Right.
They were from city schools largely.
Correct.
And these schools would send, 10, 15 kids every year to IIT. And here I was the only kid from my school who got in. And so I was a bit intimidated, to tell you the truth. And of course, people are very sharp and they have much broader awareness than I did, with my background.
Yeah.
So it was an intimidating experience. But then, the first semester went by, and I ended up getting whatever 10 out of 10 from a GPA perspective after that first semester.
Yeah.
And that changed the game for me. I said, okay, well, I can be as good as these guys, and it gave me a lot of confidence after that first, finishing that first year.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was phenomenal. It was a phenomenal ride. I'm so grateful that I was able to get those 4 years there. And the friends that I made there are still my friends. In fact,
of course,
more than half of them actually, most of the class went to the US at that point.
Oh, wow.
And more than half my classmates live within a few miles of where I live in the Bay Area. It's crazy.
That's fantastic, yeah.
And they still play bridge every weekend, just like we did in IIT.
Any particular memories that you have from this time during IIT Madras that stands out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think again we had lots and lots of fun.
Right.
It was very. We made friendships that were just lifelong friendships that endured.
Yeah.
And the fact that we were all in a hostel, I think build those ties together. You see the movie 3 Idiots, right?
Yeah, of
One
course.
of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And it's pretty reflective of life in IIT, and I think it was just a phenomenal experience all the way through.
Wow.
And there were some humbling experiences too. one of the things at IIT, you think it's a high-end engineering college, right? But the first year that we were in there, I remember, they had workshops for us.
Yeah.
And so what they did in workshops was they made us do really manual labor work,
Okay.
as IIT students. So the first 6 months, you know what they did? They gave us this U-shaped metal piece.
Yeah.
And then they gave us a file. And they said, okay, go, file it.
Yeah.
File it and make it completely flat.
Yeah.
And we had to do that for 6 months. And then the guy would measure it with the spirit level. And, if it were not perfectly level, throw it out and start over again. Very humbling experience. They wanted to teach. They made us wear khaki clothes and went off and we did that.
Yeah.
It was not esoteric stuff, right?
Yeah.
This was the stuff. They wanted to make sure that we were all very much rooted and grounded. So
that's so interesting.
No regrets, but we went through that.
And how was placement season? Were companies chasing you? How did that experience?
See, the irony, I'm saying at that point, this was in '86 when I graduated, was there weren't that many jobs in India. So yeah, there was no issue finding a job, but it wasn't. So I got a job at ITI, which is the Indian Telephone Industries.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't particularly attractive. So most of my friends and colleagues who graduated back then, we didn't take on jobs in India because it wasn't interesting.
Correct.
So the two prevailing things were you go to an IIM, get an MBA.
Yeah.
Which is great, but for me, I felt, and I did that too, and I got into the IIMs and so forth. But or you go abroad if you wanted to pursue a technical career and do research. So I ended up doing the latter.
Yeah.
Much against the objections of my parents.
Yeah.
I think they would have probably liked it if I were selling soaps or detergents at Hindustan Lever rather than going abroad. But that was the choice. So most of us ended up doing one of those two things.
Right. And how did you arrive at your decision of what you wanted to do next?
So I was just fascinated by, at that time, I got into what is called communications.
Right.
It was a subject where, how do computers talk to each other? How do people, not people, but what does it take to send data from one place to the other? And it just was a subject that fascinated me while I was at IIT.
Oh, right.
And so I figured, and I was, I was always a quant, math-oriented person.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to go do more of that. And I got an opportunity to do that at, one of the top schools in the world, at University of California, Berkeley.
Yeah.
And so it was too attractive an opportunity to pass up.
Yeah.
And of course, they paid my way through, right? They gave me a full fellowship. I didn't have to pay anything.
That's amazing.
And so why would I not do it?
Of course, right. And at this point, were your dreams or like a particular goal settling into your mind? Like, this is what I want to do from life. This is what I want from life. This is what I want to do.
No, I wish I knew that, and I had no such. By the way, I mean, that I don't think I ever had that kind of a very clear vision of where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do many years from then. I think for me, it's just been coming along the way.
Right.
And it's just come. So I certainly did not. So I was almost thinking, what was my next step? Okay, next step was, let me go study this.
Yes.
And I wasn't thinking 2 steps beyond that or 3 steps beyond that. I was 20 years old, and when I came to the US for my first plane journey.
Yeah.
And,
how was that like?
I have to tell you this irony. This is like so funny. So the first plane ride was we went from Madras, Chennai now, to Singapore, and then Singapore to San Francisco. And it turned out that we knew some people at Singapore Airlines.
Yeah.
And so as students, we got into the plane, and a couple of us went together, some of my friends and I. And we were put in the front of the plane. We didn't even know the difference between business class and economy class.
Right, yeah.
We were looking at this and saying, yeah, these seats are a little bigger than those seats back there. I wonder why they put us here. Because we got the cheapest tickets that we could.
Yeah.
And we didn't even know that, right? Certainly, it was definitely like a learning experience because everything about it was new.
Yeah.
Getting on a plane, coming here, learning to, be by yourself and cook for yourself and take care of yourself. It was a very different experience.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah. And how was your first day like when you did enter the US and you went on to this amazing campus and experienced a very different life, right? From where you've especially grown up.
Very different.
What was that like?
Yeah, first of all, I think it was just phenomenal to be there, right? Because a very different life. Yeah. It was, again, like IIT, somewhat intimidating at the front because the thing about IIT at least was once you get in, there's a lot of people who are like you.
Yeah.
When you go to the US and you go to Berkeley, you realize people are not like you.
Yeah.
They're very different. Yeah. And you're expected to be much more independent.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. Out here, I tell you, the programs were fairly structured. You were together with people. There was much more of a herd kind of mindset.
Right.
You go there and it's more individualistic. You are expected to fend for yourself. And that was a learning experience. In fact, one of the things that I had to do as part of my journey there was I had to also be a teaching assistant for a class.
Right.
And it was the first class in Introduction to Computer Science.
Yeah.
And the kids over there knew more about programming than I did because while I was at IIT, we had very little exposure to computing.
Computers at that point, yeah.
Very little. Whereas people over there, they grew up with that stuff. And the IBM personal computer had come, a few years before that, and we barely got to see that.
Yeah.
And so it was a very different experience. And learning, you have to learn really, really quickly.
Yeah. So how did the first job happen after that?
So the first job was an interesting thing there. I was just hanging out there. Then I saw this bulletin board announcement. We had bulletin boards back then.
Correct, yeah.
Saying that I was sitting at Berkeley and there was this summer internship thing that came through in IBM Zurich, Switzerland.
Yeah.
I said, what the hell, let me apply. I've never been to Europe. Let me go apply. And I sent my application in. And they said, yeah, come on over.
Wow.
So I ended up spending the summer of 1988, back 2 years after again, at the IBM lab in Zurich, which was a lab with 200 researchers and 4 Nobel laureates out of that group.
Wow.
And it was a phenomenal place. And I was just, again, the people that I was surrounded with, just phenomenal people, right, scientists. And I saw the caliber of those people. And so while I was there, I got to know about, some new work happening at IBM Research in the US, in New York.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating because it was a completely new area that was just getting going. This is sending, using optical fiber for communication.
Yeah.
So today, again, by the way, there's fiber everywhere here. You see, your fiber.
Yeah.
It wasn't the case back then. It was very new. And, how do you actually send? I mean, this is the enabler for the internet.
Correct.
Right? And it's why we're all sitting here and being able to, talk to each other on social media and have video conferencing and everything else, right?
Yeah.
So at that time, it was a completely new territory.
Of course.
And it was fascinating. So I met the person who was leading the group there. And, a couple of things happened after that. So I got my master's degree at Berkeley. I was going to be doing a PhD.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, my PhD advisor, you work with a professor, said he was going to go off into venture capital.
Okay.
And said, you probably should find another advisor. And I said, man, I'm 2 years into this. Do I have to start over again? I'd rather not. Let me go get a job and see if I can still complete my PhD.
Wow.
And so Berkeley actually allowed me to do that. So I finished my coursework. They said, yeah, you can go do your research anywhere and come back and you can file a thesis and we'll get you the degree.
Oh, wow.
So that's what happened. So I ended up taking this job at IBM Research, where, the person who hired me, his name is Paul Green, he said, yeah, you can come here. I'll support your thesis work. You can come and do your work here. And and he ended up being my co-advisor for my PhD.
Wow, what a fantastic turn of events.
I was so lucky. I just, it was so lucky that happened.
Yeah, because having a great mentor is everything.
Completely.
Especially in the formative years. Yeah, it changes you.
Completely for me.
Yeah. How? Can you tell me how did it change you as a person and how did it change the trajectory of the next few steps that would come
Completely.
on?
I mean, I think I learned a lot from that experience. Paul Green was the name of the person who hired me.
Yeah.
He was in his 60s and he was at the tail end of his career. I was at the beginning of mine.
Yeah.
And I was one of the first people he had into the group as he was starting this thing. And what I came to know was, I mean, he was a very famous guy. Everybody knew him. He was, every cell phone that we use, by the way, has an invention by him in terms of how to receive signals.
Yeah.
So, great person already. But more so than that, what he realized, and I realized later as I worked with him, was his thing was he would conceptualize things, but he would hire good talent and he would really focus on their success, enabling them to be successful.
Right.
And by making them successful, he became very successful.
Right.
And it took me a few years to kind of get that because initially I wasn't, thinking about all of that.
Yeah.
But that lesson has stuck with me all through.
Right.
So I think having a mentor and a sponsor, he opened a lot of doors for us. He helped me progress in my career. And I was so lucky to have that experience. I would urge anybody starting their careers to have good mentors and sponsors who can advocate for you and who will. It's just phenomenal. It makes a difference. And I do my best to pay that back as well.
And any advice that he gave you that still stays with you till today? Any piece of advice?
Yeah, I think a lot of things that stayed with me. One thing is that he said, he was never afraid to take risks.
Yeah.
Jump into new stuff. You don't know where it's going to go, but you know what, you should go try it out.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll win, sometimes you won't win, but it's okay.
Yeah.
So that's clearly a piece of advice. And the second thing, really, I think this notion of like how to build teams and work with teams and make teams successful so that you can be successful. I think that's a life lesson that I learned from him for sure.
Yeah. It's so intertwined. It's never independent of one another. How your team operates is how you operate.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And how did you feel when you built your first product finally?
I was thrilled because it was, as a researcher, you're fooling around with a lot of stuff and you don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And almost it's serendipitous.
Right.
When we came across, hey, we're doing all this stuff, but what's somebody going to use it for?
Correct.
And then we found the use case for it.
Yeah.
And we ended up building one of the very first products in this particular area in optical networks.
Yeah.
And I tell you, that's such a learning experience for me because for me, I was no longer just some scientist doing stuff.
Yeah.
I actually had to go build something that worked and that people would use, and also I had to go sell it.
Wow.
And so ended up selling to a bunch of customers, financial services, big banks on Wall Street in New York. And that was an experience. And I learned a lot from that process. And I didn't appreciate the fact that, we were doing this product. It was going to be a groundbreaking product in this space.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah.
But it was the experience of going through this journey was phenomenal. And it just, I think, brought in the other dimensions of what it would be like, right, to build a business.
Right. And after this, you took a job that lasted 10 years. It lasted a decade. So how did that come about? How did you kind of now venture into that level of stability when it came to
I
job?
spent about 8-9 years at IBM actually.
At IBM,
but what happened was the stuff that we were doing was very interesting to us. Not of much interest to IBM.
Yeah.
But a lot of interest, it was growing outside.
Right.
And so we ended up convincing our bosses to sell our little group.
Yeah.
We went off and sold ourselves to another company. We were there for a couple of years. And then this field was getting hotter and hotter.
Yeah.
And I started getting calls from Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Startups.
Yeah.
And at that time I said, okay, well, at that time I was married. I had 2 kids. My second son was just born.
Yeah.
I didn't think anything of that. I mean, we just picked up our bags and we moved to Silicon Valley and joined a startup.
Yeah.
It was 1999. And, it was a booming time for the Valley.
Yeah.
And so did a startup. I was employee number 3 or 4.
Wow.
We got bought for a nice amount.
Yeah.
And then the bottom came crashing afterwards.
Yeah.
There was a big crash at that point.
Yeah.
And so after that point, a large company came calling Cisco, again, sort of through the network and the connections there, and I ended up joining them.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd stay there for a couple of years.
Correct.
But ended up staying there for like a decade almost.
Yeah.
And it was a game-changing experience for me because that company, I think, is where I got my first opportunity to really, I think, go from just an engineer and a technical guy to running a business.
Right.
They gave me that opportunity.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that certainly was a change point for me in terms of my own focus to become much more of a business leader than an engineering leader.
Yeah. And you didn't consider coming back to India ever at this point?
I considered many times.
Yeah.
Many times.
Yeah.
And in fact, to his dying day, my father said, why don't you come back? And it just, but I never made it happen, right? It didn't.
Right.
And again, I think back in those days, the opportunities were not anywhere near like here. In fact, I tell you, things have changed a lot here. So back in the day, every student at IIT went abroad.
Yeah.
Most of them did.
Yeah.
I was just talking to the convocation, the last convocation at IIT Madras in the department, and nobody goes abroad these days. Very few.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities here. In fact, today the opportunities here are a lot more than what they were there. And so the ironic challenge there is the more you advance in your career over there, the more difficult it became.
Of course.
For us to make the move. And so I never did. Of course, I kept coming. I would come a couple of times a year.
Yeah.
But never made the move back.
Yeah. And is that something that, that was a conscious decision, or it kind of just happened? Like you were just going with the flow because the opportunities were there and you were settled in your life, obviously, with kids and a family.
Well, so I would think consciously about it from time to time.
Right.
On a daily basis, you would go with the flow for sure, right?
Yeah.
But then every once in a while, you sort of be forced to take it. There were moments where I think, I thought about it very seriously.
Yeah.
More so. And we almost we were even looking for schools for my kids and so forth, but we never really ultimately ended up pulling the trigger.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so now you're in this system pretty set, right? Because now you have another decade-long career with Cisco. You then went around, you meandered through the corporate world a fair bit for the next, many years. So at what point did you feel like, okay, I'm done with the corporate life? Or did you feel that? Or what was the feeling like as you were going from role to role and pretty consuming roles, right? And they were lasting long periods of time. So how did you kind of meander your way through this corporate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still in the corporate world.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm not quite out of there yet.
Yeah.
But for me, the key thing with every one of these was it has to be, first of all, a place where I'm learning.
Yeah.
And I'm being challenged.
Correct.
Every time, right? And once you stop getting to that point, then it's
Yeah.
probably time for you to think about what more you could be doing,
Yeah.
where you bring your skills to bear,
Yeah.
but at the same time you're being challenged by something new. Yeah. And so those were sort of the trigger points for my making changes in terms of what I did. So, I would do something for a few years and then I would go do something different, with the characteristic being that it would be challenging, open up new opportunities.
Correct.
And that's what I did. So that that journey goes by very quickly, but that defined me pretty much for the next 10 years or so.
Yeah. And any challenges that you faced that you distinctly remember? Something that you struggled with, or an incident, or something that happened that kind of...
Yeah, I can tell you my first job as a business leader was very tough. It was probably the toughest ever job in my career.
Right.
Because first of all, I had no experience.
Yeah.
Never done that before. Here I was a technical guy who knew the technology, who could do that piece of it really well. I had also managed smaller teams of people.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden I was put to manage a business that had a couple of thousand people.
Yeah.
And a business that was in serious trouble.
Right.
And so the first thing you realize is that now you have to really get your team to perform.
Right.
And it's not your technical skills that matter anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about how you deal with people, how you work with people, how you make them productive. And it's about making the right strategic calls in terms of what to do with the business.
Yeah.
So that is absolutely a trial by fire experience for me. And luckily, again, I had some good mentors who helped me find my way through that for the next couple of years. And it ended up being a very successful thing towards the end of it. And it opened the door for me to get, frankly, much easier roles that were more, easier and bigger general management roles. But that first job, I think, was certainly a big turning point because it's really, I think, what you realize is that it's no longer what you know that matters. It's about what you have to learn and how you have to perform in a different business. And it also gave me the confidence to say, I can go run something else. I can run a business where I am not the domain expert.
Yeah.
I don't know the ins and outs of this stuff. There's going to be people on the team that know a lot more than I do.
Yeah. But I can kind of manage the entire show.
I can guide it. I can ask the right questions. I can understand what are the basic things that need to get done. And again, continue to learn on the job. Learn the specific dynamics of the business and what you need to do.
And then you ended up working at Nutanix. So how did you choose that path? And when did you realize that you were ready to be CEO?
Yeah, that I think it's been a gradual progression, of course. As I've taken on all these general manager roles over time, it became a logical next step to think about what do you do next. And the logical next step was the CEO role. So it's been in the back of my mind for a while. But this one came along, the opportunity came along. And like everything else, it comes along through the network.
Yeah.
And so one of the early investors in Nutanix happened to be my friend, and he's also I work very closely with him with some of the charitable work that we do. And so he told me, hey, Nutanix is looking for the CEO. He thought I'd be a good fit. Wow. Why don't you at least consider it? And like all the other roles that I've taken on, I sort of look for, okay, is this an area where I can bring some of my skills to bear? Yeah. And am I going to learn something new?
Yeah.
And I think it very much checked the boxes on both of those, right? And I also knew the company from the outside.
Right.
And had pretty good regard for it, in terms of, very, very good company, pioneering company in the Valley, had built up a $1 billion business as a startup and had done pretty well. So, I was, it was very interesting. So he ended up making the connection with the board of directors and they ended up hiring me and here I am. It's been 2 years already.
And how has it been? Like, what was the first few months as being CEO, which is obviously the gradual next step, but it's a new role in the sense of its entirety.
And perhaps the most interesting thing was I joined in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
And it was completely virtual, right? So we were all shut down. I mean, nobody was going to the offices. On a normal role like this, typically I would have spent the first couple of months meeting people, traveling around, around the world, meeting customers, meeting partners, meeting employees. And of course, here I was doing all this from home, on Zoom or video conferencing. And so I developed a routine and it actually worked way better than I thought.
Right.
Because of technology and tools. So I was able to actually meet a lot more people virtually than I would if I had actually done it the traditional way of going physically.
Right. Right.
And then for the people who were local, what I would do is we would have them come over to my house and we would just go for walks.
Oh.
And I developed a reputation as being somebody that likes to go on these long walks and talk, and walks became also good workouts for people. So it actually worked well. That the COVID piece actually was surprisingly easier than I thought in terms of managing through that. But aside from that, I think look, the thing that you realize is that at this point, you're the CEO, so you're going to have to make some difficult calls and set priorities fairly quickly.
Right.
So the good news there was I had a view coming in, already having known the company from the outside, and I took the first few months to revalidate that view and what needed to be done. And then about 4 or 5 months later, we ended up setting up a set of priorities and communicating that to our investors or employees.
Right, right. And what was the most challenging part of this new role? Like, did you, for some it could be a work-life balance, right? Because it's so consuming. Was there any particular challenge that?
Yeah, it wasn't as much work-life balance. I mean, it's more, to me, by the way, it's work-life integration.
Right.
Because at this point, we're doing work, we're integrating. It's not that it's completely separated. You're sitting at home, you're working from wherever you are, mixing stuff up. So that wasn't as much of the challenge. I think the challenge here, I think, was more, it's on you.
Right.
You have to make the calls.
Right.
And it's not like you can go to somebody else. Of course, you have a board of directors. But the board of directors is there to advise at a higher level. They're not involved with the day-to-day working of the company. That's yours. It's so you feel an enormous sense of responsibility. We have 6,000 plus employees, and it's like you have to care for them.
Yeah.
And so I felt that weight, right, to make sure that the decisions that you make have a significant impact on the future. And so that weight, that's a weight to carry, that you have to carry. You have to make sure your people are taken care of, your customers are taken care of, your investors are taken care of. And so shouldering on that responsibility, I think, doesn't come easily.
Yeah, it's a big piece to chew.
Yes.
Yeah. And how is it that you were maneuvering these 6,000 employees, right? Like, have you met all of them? Have you interacted with them? Or how is it? How is it typical?
We do a lot of communication. I mean, I can't say I've met all of them, but we met a lot of people, and we do a lot of informal and formal communications. And it's so important, especially in a world where we are more and more virtual.
Yeah.
So we have regular town halls. Every month we have a town hall. I have one of my favorite things is I get small groups of people together from around the company. Virtually. There'll be 20 people of various functions, various groups, and I just sit down with them for an hour and we talk about anything.
Right. Wow.
And I do that all the time. I do that, a few times a month.
Yeah.
And it's, it's my way of, like, in the old days they would say you walk around and talk to people.
Yeah.
Well, you can't walk around.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah. So this is what you do, and it's super effective because it builds a connection.
Yeah.
It builds a connection for me with what an employee is thinking and what's top of mind for them.
Right. Yeah.
And all kinds of stuff come out of those conversations. Including discussions around should we have free food and should we have more people in the office more of the time, or stuff like that doesn't even have to do with
anything related to
business, but it's just life, and so those are the kind of things.
Yeah.
And so we did a lot. I mean, to your point, getting to know people, and for me, it's not just about the employees; it's about the employees, the customers, the investors. That
so
whole,
many stakeholders,
all the stakeholders essentially.
Yeah.
And spending time virtually, I think was super critical. I still spend a lot of time on that.
Fantastic.
In fact, this is my first trip to India.
Oh wow!
As part of Nutanix. It's been 2 years now, and it's great to meet people. Are starting to come back to the offices. We have several thousand people here in India, and we're it's great to see people in our Bangalore offices and Pune offices earlier this year and meet all our customers.
Yeah, it's a good feeling.
Yeah. And at some point, virtual doesn't cut it. You have to meet people face to face.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
And you have many feathers in your caps, right? Like cap, you have 36 patents, a best research paper award. You've written a textbook on the same subject. But what drives you? What drives you about what you do?
Yeah, see, today, first of all, I mean, those are all days from my past, from my days as a researcher and long gone by, and perhaps the best years of my life in some sense.
Yeah.
But today, I think, for me, there's a few things. There's probably three things. One is, of course, look, you have a responsibility for the company and you want to make sure that we end in a good, we take it to a better place, right? Always, that's been my philosophy with every job, you want to take it forward to a better place than where it was when you started. And so that's clearly one. The second, of course, is my family. And for me, that's been, something that I would say I didn't spend as much time on. I wish at this point when I look back, my kids are all grown up.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd actually been there more for them when they were growing up. But, it was busy. We were fair. I was on the road all the time. And, so my wife was also a career person at one point. We had to make a very tough call. And I am so thankful that she made the call to stay at home and take care of the children.
Right.
And she gave up her career, right? Which is a very big move for her. But, it's different when you're in the US. You're by yourself. You don't have a big network of family or to support you and so forth. And one day she was driving home from work, and she went off to the side of the road. Right, she was so tired and she was so sleepy, and that was a wake up call for us, literally.
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, look, I don't think we should be doing this.
It's not sustainable."
Yeah, it's not sustainable, and I think it would be better for all of us if I stay home. And she made the call.
Wow.
Thanks to her, and that made an enormous difference. It allowed me to be, of course, much more free. I mean, in a somewhat selfish way, to be out on the road and do what I needed to do. So the family, I think, is super important. And still, it's great to see my kids thrive and build their own careers. And none of them are in tech, by the way. And they're kind of in tech in an indirect way. Both of them ended up being in finance and building their career in tech. But I'm so happy to see that family part of it.
Yeah.
And the third piece of it, like, at this point in my career, it's like, what can you do to, what in a small way to make the world a better place? And, you're always, first part of it is all you're thinking about your own life and your own career and your own, building of wealth and career progression and so forth.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point where, okay, what's your legacy and what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
And so I spend more time on that now, and especially over the last 5-6 years, than I ever did before.
Right. And how's Rajiv, the family man? What do you do at home? How do you spend time with your family? What is that life like?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're nothing special from that perspective. The interesting thing is even being there, we are very Indian in terms of our culture, and we like to watch all the Bollywood movies, and my kids enjoy watching Bollywood movies.
Right.
They're into music, and my son actually is a percussionist, an Indian percussionist, and he actually goes around the country in the US and plays percussion, right, for concerts. So and we love to travel together. That travel bug is in all of us, by the way. So we've traveled around the world. We've traveled around all over. Beyond that, I think we have our own hobbies. These days, it's my wife and my son, who's an adult but works at home because his company, he works for Apple, and it's like literally 10 minutes away from home. So he stays home. And so we have actually more time to do our thing. And so typically what happens in the evenings these days is, after I finish my work a little bit, then we take a break. My wife is on her computer, I'm on my computer. We're sitting in the same room and talking. And then, we mix up work and pleasure, right, at that point. But it's normal. And then I have my hobbies after that. I play tennis, I play bridge, I do a fair bit of reading when I can. So it's
a simple, sweet kind of
exactly. Nothing special or out of the ordinary here.
Yeah. And what's the one thing that you've learned from someone who you didn't expect to learn it from? Is there anybody like that in your life? Or it doesn't have to be in your life. It could be a passing, just a rendezvous.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I have to give this to my daughter.
Yeah.
She often tells me, don't worry about this stuff. She's got this thing about, she's super efficient about getting stuff done.
Right.
And she doesn't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
She focuses on the important things. And, for me, I tend to be much more detail oriented, and I tend to sweat everything.
Yeah.
And she's taught me, like, hey, don't worry about all this little stuff. It's okay. So what? Get going, get moving. So it's like, so you learn.
It'll pass. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so much of your life has had to do with learning, right? Like even when you were talking about value, you were constantly saying that it has to teach me something.
Yes.
Is that the reason you started one school at a time? That's something that you kind of began.
Yeah, I didn't start it, to be fair. I joined it. It was just already in its it was already going, a small group of volunteers. But I don't think it was as much about learning as it was about saying, what should I focus my giving back time on?
Correct.
And look, you can give time and you can give money, right? I mean, those are the two things you can do.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a combination of both. And for me, it was, what mattered to me was always education. Right. I tell you, I got to where I was because of the education I got.
Yeah.
And I can see that, and that's something where I feel like a lot of people, still don't have access to basic education. So that became a very focus area for me.
Yeah.
This is something, infrastructure is something that's enduring. You build something, and it's there for 50 years.
Is this also a strong connection for you with your country?
Absolutely.
Because you're able to give back now to this ecosystem.
Completely. And I feel like, look, I'm where I am because of what this country gave me.
Yes.
And certainly, right. And I've always, I've never left, really in any way, right. I mean, yes, I'm maybe physically there, but mentally my heart is here.
Yeah.
And so we built, it started out very small. We built, used to build 1 or 2 schools like this a year. And now we do about a dozen schools a year.
Wow.
And we keep growing. We've also launched a digital initiative at this point.
Yeah.
Where, for e-learning for kids, and we give kids tablets. And one of the interesting things about that is now you can actually analyze and see really how well they're progressing very quickly.
Yes.
Because everything is available, online. You can look at the results, you can look at how they're performing, which is much more difficult to do, in a physical setting.
Yeah.
So we've got our traditional school buildings, and then we've got the digital initiative. And what I like about this is also it's 100% volunteer run.
Yeah.
We don't, it's not a professional organization. It's an NGO with mostly people in tech who are giving their time to building these.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And what's next for you?
Look, I think I haven't, like I said, my stuff goes along. I've never really thought about
you don't have it.
What's long term and next. It's always come along for me.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think I tell you, I mean, it's clearly it's the same 3 things that I talked about, which is continue to make sure that Nutanix goes to a good place and continues to grow and continues to thrive.
Yeah.
My family continuing to thrive and continuing to go forward in their lives. And the third piece is, of course, what can I do on my small part to help give back?
Yeah, to make the world a better place.
Yes.
Okay, so we move on to the next segment. It's called Things About Me You Can't Find on Google.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah. If not this, what would you be doing?
Yeah, the interesting thing for me is I actually like to write.
Oh, okay.
And I read a lot. I used to read a lot, or more so than I do now. And I do like to write small pieces here and there. And it's been very sporadic. I write about random things. I write about travel or experiences. And these days I've started writing to my teams about, when I go someplace and, just summarize what it's like. I feel like I should tell them what I've been up to.
Yeah.
And so I like to write. Yeah. And I don't know if that'd be ever a full-time job for me, but and especially when I like to, write, it's about personal experiences more so than abstract stuff.
Yeah. What's the first thing you do when you wake up?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have a cup of tea. Okay, chai. Okay, I need
that part of India.
That part of India, it's like, but then I try to get my workout in.
Okay.
So an hour of workout, if at all possible, every day if I can.
Wow.
So,
what's your favorite time of the day?
I have to say it's the morning.
Yeah.
Because I'm a morning person. I get up fairly early in the morning, do my thing.
Yeah. Any character from a film or book that you relate the most to?
Yeah, that's a very good one. There's lots of characters and lots of films I mentioned 3 Idiots, right? I mean, that resonates very well with me because of what I went through in my own personal experience. I think that was a really, really good. So from a film perspective, it was a very relatable kind of thing.
And your favorite Bollywood movie otherwise?
Favorite Bollywood movie otherwise? I have to say probably Lagan.
Oh, wow.
Dating myself.
Okay. What's your comfort food?
Dosa.
Yeah. Yum. Who do you call when you have good news to share?
My wife first. Always.
Okay. The next segment is kind of to get you to talk about a photograph that we have.
Okay.
It's an old photograph, so you have to give us what was going on around when that was happening.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Oh, this one. This is my IIT graduation picture.
Wow. So what was going on? What was that day like?
Boy, that was a long time ago. The thing that I remember the most about that was my parents weren't there.
Oh.
And again, they were very busy, right? They had their careers. They were, I think, out of town that particular day.
Yeah. And
traveling on business. And so I ended up going out and getting that degree myself. And by the way, the irony is that was the same case with my master's degree and my PhD. All of which I went there and collected my degrees by myself. So, but it was for me more so than anything else. it was like I had so enjoyed my 4 years at IIT that it was a very difficult thing to actually let go and leave. And more than anything else, that's probably what was running in my mind back then when this was happening.
And then this one.
Oh, that's my family from the, let me see, I have to wear my glasses here and see. Okay, this is, I had both my kids there, so this is probably in the mid-90s.
Wow.
And that's my family. So we used to live in Chennai in railway quarters, as they said.
Right.
So the railway had these old colonial buildings back from the British era that they would let some of their employees live in. So we lived in one of those in Chennai. And so this is from that compound. And we used to go back, even when my kids were small, we used to go back every year without fail. And the kids got their India immersion, and I'm proud of the fact that they still speak our language.
Oh, wow.
Right? After having grown up there. And they still have their cultural roots here. And so that was one of those trips. And I think that my parents were there, and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who lived the longest among all my grandparents, was with us, staying with us.
Amazing. Last questions. A habit that you feel contributed to your success?
I would say discipline, more than anything else. I'm fairly disciplined about getting stuff done on time, making sure I understand what needs to get done when, and not trying to be last minute and rushed about trying to be crazily there. So fairly organized about getting stuff done. That's helped me multitask, because I think you just have a lot going on, and you have to be fairly systematic in how you go about it.
Absolutely. And what piece of advice would you give to the 20-year-old Rajiv?
20-year-old Rajiv. So as a 20-year-old, I tell you, the one thing you can do is take risks, which I wasn't at that point. It was not part of my DNA to go do a startup or anything. It wasn't even there as a consideration. So here, and even like what you've done, for example, starting this, right? I mean, it's something different. It's not a run-of-the-mill career choice, right? And so I think as a 20-year-old, you have nothing to lose. You have everything to gain. And go out there and go do what you think you want to do, and go take chances.
Take the risk.
Take the risk, absolutely. And you won't regret it.
Amazing. It's been such a lovely interview, Rajiv, and I think there's so much to learn and there's so much to share, and I hope that our audience, our community, which is predominantly the youth, learns that much from you. So it's been absolutely amazing.
It's been so wonderful talking to you, Karishma.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you find this useful as well. So
of course,
thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you.
If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon. Thank you all for being the best community, and I'll see you soon.
Like I always these days say jokingly, right? If you want to make people happy with you, you should start off by disappointing them so much that they have no expectations left of you. When they have no expectations left, you'll only make them happy. You can never disappoint them. So in a sense, that's what defined my journey. There were no expectations.